thank you everyone for joining us in this SmartList trek that we're on in the next couple of weeks. I get to start it out with a Get Starting with SmartList Builder session here. My name is Nicole Albertson and I'm the product manager for SmartList Builder at eOne Solutions. Recognize some of the names in the webinar, so thank you for those that I've met before for joining us and a lot that I haven't met. Thank you for joining us as well. Hopefully we can meet in the future. So today we're going to go through SmartList Builder, kind of a basic overview. We'll get into some things that might get a little bit more complex, but still give you some guidance as how you go through building that first list. Maybe it's your third list. You know, not real advanced stuff today. That we're going to save that for Thursday, so join us then if you want that. But we will go through some of the features. Now, there are a lot of us on here, so I'm going to leave the phones muted, but if you have questions, there is a question option in the GoToWebinar tool. There is also a chat if you want to do that. Reminder that that chat goes to the entire audience unless you change it. I also am recording this session for future reference for you. It takes a couple hours for it to build the recording and get it all ready to go, but after that you'll get an email from the GoToWebinar tool saying, thank you for joining us. Here's a link to your webinar. So take a look out for that. If your GoToWebinar stuff does go to your junk mail or something, pay attention there too if you're looking for the recording. Okay, so let's just jump in. Now, for those who aren't familiar, I just want to quickly go through what is SmartList Builder. SmartList Builder is built in 4 different tools. You get all 4 of them with SmartList Builder. And so you get the ability to create new smart lists using obviously the SmartList Builder tool. You get the Excel report builder, which builds new refreshable Excel reports, very similar to SmartList. It's just that they're in Excel and you don't have to export your SmartList to Excel. It refreshes right in Excel. Navigation List Builder creates new navigation lists, which are those lists on the left-hand side of GP. When you pick, say, sales and then customer, that would be a navigation list. Drill Down Builder allows us to create new drill downs from Excel back to GP. So similar how you can double click on a record or go to the Go To button in SmartList and drill back to GP, we can add that same functionality to your refreshable Excel report from the Drill Down Builder tool. Okay, and what data can we use in SmartList Builder, or any of the builders as we'll call it today? Of course, we can use any of the Microsoft Dynamics GP tables. That means any of the core modules, your general ledger, sales order processing, payroll, anything like that. Any of the add-ons that Microsoft has, your project accounting, human resources, manufacturing, and then any third parties that you might have that are integrated into GP. We can pull those tables using the GP table option. SmartList table type will be available in only the SmartList Builder tool, and that allows us to pull in those default smart lists. So we have that starting point and we can add what those might be missing or change up how the formatting is, whatever we need to those lists so that you don't have to start from scratch. SQL Server table is going to allow you to pull any SQL table or view from your SQL Server as long as it exists on the same SQL Server as GP, we can pull in those tables and views. SQL Script is going to allow you to write any select statements to pull data from any databases on the same SQL Server as GP is running. It's only select statements. You can't do inserts, updates, deletes, so we don't have to worry about changing data. It just allows us to select that data. The nice thing about that is a lot of times you'll find people posting scripts on reports they've created online, and we can just basically copy those scripts, put them in there. Sometimes we have to remove some comments that they've put because the comments throw SmartList off, but we can post those right in there, and then we can get that report that they've built for us and without having to rebuild it from scratch. Data connections is for the Excel report builder. That's the same basic concept as SmartList. It's just that in Excel reports, they're called data connections, and that's that connection string for the default reports that Microsoft ships. so that we can pull in those and modify those as we need to. And then extender resource, if you're using eOne's extender product to build new windows and forms to capture additional data, we want you to, of course, be able to pull that into the list as well. So if you have eOne's extender product, that'll show on the list. If you don't, you'll never see that on your list. Okay, so let's jump over to GP. And what we're going to build today as we go is a list of payables transactions. Just kind of a basic list of those transactions, but the big thing I want with that is some GL information. So I want all the basics of the PM transaction, as well as things like the journal entry, the distribution account amounts, the transaction date from general ledger, that type of stuff. So we're going to see if we can build this, and as we go, we'll kind of look at the different features that we have available to us. So basically what I want is this information from the general ledger, from the journal entry, linked back to this payables transaction, the payment, and all of that information. Okay, so we're going to try and build what these windows have into a smart list. Now, I don't know the tables. My background with GP is on the system side. I can update your system, but telling you how to do anything inside of GP is not my forte, unless it has to do with SmartList Builder. So how do I know what tables this is going to pull from? Well, with SmartList Builder, we have a tool called Table Finder. It helps you find the tables from any window, including those third parties that you might have. And where we find it is under GP and then the Tools menu on any window. So if we come back to our GP and we'll go to the journal entry, under Tools, you'll see Table Finder. Now this is only available if you have SmartList Builder installed on that workstation. So make sure you have that if you're not finding it. But what it does is it tells me that journal entry inquiry window has these tables involved in it. Now that's a lot of tables. I still wouldn't know which table this is, but what we can do is take it a step further and pick the different fields. So I know I want maybe that transaction date. So I can pick that and it tells me here's the tables that's in. Okay, I can work with that because when I look at this, this is history, open, and work. Is it unposted, posted to an open year, or posted to a history year? That's what that tells me. And when we're talking about that, we just have to pick where we're going to start. And then we'll show you in a little bit later how we add on those other tables. But we have to pick one. So we start in history, we start in open. You don't just have to pick one. Now the same thing goes for our distribution window, or our payables window. We can go to Table Finder. Oops, I had it still open. And it's going to tell me that window as well. And I can pick fields here and go through this. And of course, we're going to hit our history, open, work, the key master, and if we're using some multi-currency information, depending on what we want. But what I do is take the window, and the way I like to do it is a good old way of screenshotting it, printing it out, because I like to have things on paper, and I sit with my pen, circle all the fields I want on my list, and then I go through Table Finder and start looking where are they, and what common fields am I finding. Obviously I'm going to want work, open, and history. I know that. But when you're talking, is it the vendor master? Is it something else? What are my common fields? What list of fields can I narrow this down to get the data I want? Okay, so I've done that for these two windows for us and just kind of sat and gone through this to see what I can do. So what we can do here is we can pick a table and we can hit create smart list and it'll put that table as our first list into SmartList Builder, or you can do Excel or Navigation List Builder. But I want to do it the good old-fashioned way of opening it and doing it myself so you guys can see that whole process. So I'll open SmartList Builder. And we're just going to give this an ID of PM with GL. And now I get to pick which series I want to put that in. I could put it in general ledger or in the financials. I could put it in the payable and the purchasing. I could put it in company if I really wanted to. It doesn't matter. But to make sense to my users, I think I'll put it in the purchasing. And now we need to start somewhere. Well, I think I want to start with the distributions. That's the real data I want out of this. And then I want to add on kind of that transactional header stuff and then add on the general ledger stuff. So let's start with our PM distribution, and we'll do open to start. So we're going to do the work open. It's all in one table in the distributions. So we'll add that. And you can see that as I was doing that, if I come back in here, all the different fields that are available, all the products that I talked about that are installed in my GP system will be available. So it's a lot of tables, and that's where that table finder can help you work through that list if you're not familiar with them. Once you've added a table now, just to get us going so we can even look at this in SmartList, we need to add some fields. So by default, it marks everything for display. That's that button when you go to columns in SmartList and click add, that we can add new columns. Anything you have marked for display here will be available to add. But what I need to do is tell it which ones should be on this list by default when the user runs that asterisk list. So let's get voucher number. Let's do credit amount, debit amount, and let's find vendor ID. Okay. So now, just to show you, I'm going to save this, launch SmartList, and because I've made changes, it's asking, do I want to put those SmartList Builder changes into SmartList? I'll say yes. There is security behind that, so if you don't get that option, you may not have security to update SmartList. And now under the purchasing series, since I'm logged in as SA, I have full rights. I automatically got access to that list. If you don't automatically get access, somebody will need to grant that to you because only power users will automatically get access to the list. And so here's those 4 columns I marked from that distribution table. Okay, so we're started, but you know what? We need that more of the information from the actual payables transaction, not just the distributions. So let's go add that. I'm going to click modify. And as we come through here, now I can add another table. You can have up to 32 tables. So you can keep going now. If you can get past about 12, more power to you. I've never needed that many, but you can add up to 32. And so we're going to pick the PM transaction work. I think we'll go to work. I said open, but I think we'll do work. And we'll come back and get the others there. Okay, now it says what table do you want to link it to? We only have one other one so far, so that's our only option. But if you have multiple in here, you have to choose how does this work in your list of tables that you have. And so what we have to decide is to make this data link up in this smart list, how does the data from that transaction work match the data from my distributions? Well, in payables, it's the voucher number, and then there's a control type. Okay, when we're back in table finder, do I still have that open? Sometimes you can pick that out because it puts the keys on them. Those are the keys in that table, but a lot of times that's the key to the data as well between joining them. So you kind of have to look at it. What is the common fields that are going to make this record unique to what I want? But generally it's a document number, it's a document type, in this case control type, a master number, your customer number, your vendor ID, something to that effect. When we do this, we have to choose, is it a left outer join or an equals join? Equals is what's going to default, and that means that the data that's in my first table, my PM transaction or my PM distribution work open, if there's a record that exists in that table and a record that exists in the PM transaction work file, it will show them. If something exists in the distribution that doesn't exist in the transaction work, it will not show it. And vice versa, if it exists in the transaction work and doesn't exist in the distribution, it will not show it. So it has to exist in both tables. Left outer says, if it exists in my first table, always show it. Then show any matching data that exists in this second table I'm adding. So do you want it to only show data that exists in both, or show everything from the first table and anything that matches from the second? You have to kind of decide that. If you're not sure, I recommend going with left outer. It is the chance that it gives you more data than you need, but at least you're not getting less data than you need. We can always come in and change it from left outer to equals if we end up finding that's the case, but in most scenarios, you're going to want a left outer. And now I said it matches on the voucher number. And for some reason, they called it voucher number work in here. This one does not have voucher number work, but that's what they did in payables. It's the only place you'll find that, where in the work table, it's called voucher number work instead of just voucher number. And then control type was our other. Okay, so we have that. Now we need to pick the tables that are the fields that we want from our transaction work. So let's get our document number, document type, and document date. Okay, and if I save this, it'll auto refresh into SmartList because I have it open. And now you can see it didn't pull in data for most of those. Did I pick the wrong field? Nope. Apparently only one of them is in the work. Remember that distribution is work and open. And so I only have the work on for these fields, so the rest must be in the open table. But we did link on where it's appropriate. The rest is just showing blanks. It didn't exclude them. If I had chosen equals, I would only have these 4 records. It wouldn't have gotten the rest of them. So that is the difference there. Okay, now what other little things do I need to this list? Well, you know what? I put the vendor ID on here from my distributions, but if you're like our company, the ID doesn't mean much. The name is probably a better thing. That's in a different table. And we would have found that with Table Finder. So let's go get the vendor master. And of course, it's called PM Vendor Master. And again, we're just going to do our left outer. You shouldn't have a vendor listed in one without the other, but I'm just going to do left outer just to be safe for my own knowledge. Save that. And we only want the vendor name there, so we'll mark that. And that gives us our payables information, but now I said I wanted that GL data on there too. How do I get that GL data? Well, we looked at the tables earlier for that. It happens to be those work open and history tables we saw. So we're going to start, we'll just do the open, because if it came from payables and it's going down to GL, it's probably posted there because I'm set up to post through. So we'll just do that. And it obviously doesn't link to the PM vendor master. It links onto the distributions. And I know that because, you know, what are we going to link on it but those accounts and that journal entry? And so where are the accounts but in the distributions? and it is transaction source to originating transaction source, and then the account index, but it's distribution account index in this, and then it's account index here, which is our behind the scenes account number. And then it'd be the voucher number to the originating control number, which would be our, when you see control, it's kind of that document number type field, but when we're talking general ledger, the document can come from sales, purchasing, payroll, wherever. So they don't call it document number or something like that. It's just control number. Okay, so those are our 3 links that we need to do there. And this linking, to be honest with you, is the hardest part. So a lot of times, because I don't know those 3 fields, I know account index, I got that one, but how do I know which other ones? I put each table in a different smart list. So create, in this case, I might create 3 or 4 different smart lists and just pull the data from those tables. And I start looking, what is the common scenarios? You know, oh, here's my voucher number, that's what the fields are called. Here's where it's linking. The other thing you can do is when you talk, you know, we were here, and I use this source document to drill back to the transaction. Well, that's a good idea that is something there. So what is this source document? You know, not just PMTRX, but obviously more of the true source document number, and it drills back to that voucher number. So those types of clues are there for you on where are you clicking in GP to get back to that same type of data. You have to find those common denominators. And like I said, a lot of times I just have to look at the data and start trying. You can always come back if you tried one field and it's not right. You can come back and remove it, try another one, edit it to link to a different field. We just have to try. Okay, if I save this, oops, I forgot to mark any fields, didn't I? So let's get a couple. Now, the ones I want here aren't all right at the top. So another little clue for you here is on the blue bar, this arrow here, I can click that drop down and I can order this in a different order. By default, they just come in the order they are in that table and how they were created in GP. But I can do it by, you know, display name. If I want all the ones I've marked for default on top, I can do it by that. But I'm going to do display name. So they're alphabetical for me here. So let's go get the journal entry. Let's get the transaction date. Go back up and get our account index. Let's get our credit amount and debit amount. And then let's get that originating transaction source. Okay, save that and see what we get. Okay. So again, we're not getting this data for the document number because I linked on the work table. We haven't linked on the open in the history, but we are getting some of the information from the GL. Some of it we're not, just because, again, we're in that work open history scenario. So a few of them are coming in. It looks kind of weird because it puts zeros in if it's an integer and there isn't a value. It puts a 1900 in if it's a date and there isn't a value. Little things like that. We can come back here and I can say, you know what? Here again, I can do that default status for transaction date. If I click on the little blue arrow here, it brings me into the field options. There's a checkbox for display 1900 as blank. I do that and save it. And I only did transaction date, that's what I did. So you can see it went blank, so it's a little bit prettier, and then I only get values where it's there. And now I have other dates. I could go in and do those as well, or I can go to options, edit field settings, pick date, mark them all. This is a mark all, unmark all, so I can mark them all, check that box, and save. And now any date that I put on my list will not show unless there's a valid date in it. This one was way down at the bottom. So easy way to edit multiple fields if you want to. Otherwise, you can do them one by one if you'd like. Each field type has its own settings. So, voucher number is a string field, so there isn't much to format there. There is a few things if it's a phone number or social security number, things like that. Dollar amounts or integers have the same window. It's just what is checked by default. If it's a currency field, we automatically show the currency symbol 1000 separator, but you can turn those off. Maybe it's a percentage, you want to show that. Decimal places, how many do you want? We do 2 by default. And negative values, if you want to make a field negative based on something else, you can. So say we're in sales and I have a return. I can tell it to make the returns negative. So I just do, say, the extended price, and I mark that field, or I'm changing the settings on that field, and I say based on a SOP type of return, make it negative. And then that would be negative. The invoices, quotes, all of those would be positive. So we can do that as well. Okay. We have the account index coming from here. The account index is just a number. You can see it kind of in the background here, showing a number that means nothing to anyone unless you concentrate on looking at SQL data and not your account numbers. Means nothing. But what to do to get to the actual account number? All you have to do is on your account index field, because the account number will not be in most of these tables, just come into the field settings, check account index, show account number, save that, and we will automatically show the account number now. Even though it's called account index, we'll show you the account number that goes with that instead. Of course, it resorted there on us. So you'll see that. Okay, so that's easy. Then what we can do is come in here and either just rename it here, or if you go back into the field settings, you could rename it there. So now it's just account, or I could put account number or whatever you want to call it. So some field settings there. Okay, I'm not going to clean up all of the fields, but you can do different field settings. You can rename the fields. We can actually reorder them by going to columns. So if I wanted something reordered, maybe I want debit below credit, you can do that. Move them up and down, and that's the order that will show by default. Now, we've talked about having the work to open the history. I need to add that history onto here. So how do we do that? There isn't a way, so say we have this PM distribution work open, we need the history one. There isn't a way that I just come in and add another GP table, because how do I link the history to the work? There is no transaction, or there better not be a transaction in both of them that matches. If there is, something happened in my posting process. So they basically have the same data, just two different statuses of transactions, right? So when we talk that work open history scenario, instead of trying to add a new table, if you double click on the existing one, you get this match tables button here. When we click that, it says, what tables do you want to match? So now I can pick that PM distribution history. And when I save that, you can see these are all the fields from the work open table, and it has matched them to the ones in the history table. Now, something like this rate type ID says not matched. What happens is in the work open table, there is a field called rate type ID. it doesn't exist in the history table. So if I leave it at not matched, I just will not have that field available to me to use. I can map it to something else if it's actually called something else. Remember I said that voucher number work is just voucher number once we get out of the work table. So that would be a case where I'd match it to the other name. Or because it doesn't truly exist, I can say blank. Then if I have it, it'll show it. If there is no data to show in that field because it comes from history, it'll just be blank, and that's fine. So do you not want the field at all? Do you want it to be blank when it doesn't exist? Or does it match to something else that just has a different name? We can do that. There won't be too many that you find that say matched or not matched when you go through here. Usually they're at the end, and it has to do with things like you can see the calculation for rates and stuff like that, that once it's posted, all that calculation isn't there anymore. We don't need to store that data. So that's the kind of stuff that goes away. Not really too often is it stuff you would actually include on your list that's not matched. And then you need to enter in the table description for each, and I'll show you what this is going to do. So we'll just do work open, and we'll do history here. Now what it does is you can see the icon changed. It used to look like the rest of these. Now it looks like it's got multiple tables there. And it added this field called table description. I'm going to turn that on and just save this. And now we were getting about 700 records before. Now we hit our 1,000 max, so we know we're getting more records. But you can see if I scroll over to the table description, this record came from history. This one came from the work open. You know, and as I go through, I can see where they're coming from. Okay, so you don't have to use that field if you don't care where they're coming from, but if you want to know, is it in history, is it in work, you can turn that on and then you know. Now, we still need the open in history on our PM transaction work. We need it on our year-to-date transaction open. We need the work in the history. So we would go through that same process and do match tables, add them in. You know, if you want to change any of the not matched to blank or anything like that, you can do that so that you don't have to watch me do all of that. I actually have one in here that has a match. So if I come in here, you can see I have the history here. I didn't put the work on here because we post through, so there'd never be any work. But if you need the work, you could add it on. This one, oops. This one will have open and history on there. So that is available to do. So this is basically the full list we were trying to build, just so you don't have to watch me build this. I'm going, well, we'll just leave it in SmartList Builder where it is. Now, if I save this, whoops, I have to tell it what folder to go into. So I'm going to save this. And of course, the columns are a little bit different order. I'm pulling in the general ledger stuff first. And I haven't done all that formatting, so you can see this one's back to, I would need to go in and turn off the 11-1900, stuff like that. But I'm getting all the payables transactions. Some of them haven't hit general ledger, but here's a bunch that have, and I kind of get that information. So it's a payables list with the general ledger information added when appropriate. Might not be appropriate because, again, it hasn't hit general ledger yet for some of these, but that is basically it. So if we look at this, couple things to talk about. This is actually already built for you. So if you want this list, you've been trying to write down as I go, you're going, can I get the recording so that I can go back and figure out how she linked the tables to build this one myself? In SmartList Builder, if you go to the tool SmartList Builder import, I believe it was 2015 that we added the import from web. I could be wrong and it could be 2016, but somewhere back then. So hopefully you're all on something newer. If you're on 18 point anything, you'll have it. There's an import from web tab here, and then you can pick the product. Now, not all of these products are going to have anything to import. I have not written something to import for, say, Bad Daybook. You know, it's just the main ones, mostly GP. You're going to find some project accounting. I think there's a couple fixed assets, manufacturing, stuff like that. And then I go to the series of purchasing. There's a whole bunch in here, but if you look here, the PM distributions with GL detail, I have it for a SmartList Builder report. I have it for an Excel report. So where do I want it? There's also a summary. It depends on, do you post to GL in detail or summary? What is your setup? Is why there's two different ones here. So make sure you get the right one for your setup, because it's going to matter. You won't get any GL detail if you choose the wrong one. So I could check that, and let me do it for Excel report builder just because I already have it in SmartList Builder. And I click import. It takes a second here, but it's going out to the website and pulling that down for you. And when I say the website, if you go to eonesolutions.com and go to downloads and choose SmartList Builder, we're going to have our please wait right in the middle of our screen, but that's okay. And go to templates, you will see all these different templates. Okay, so if I go to purchasing, there is those PM distribution ones along with all the other ones that were displayed there. And you can download them here too. If you're not on one that has that import from web, you can download them here and then go and import the files manually, the other tab in there. If you don't have the import from web, you won't have two tabs. It'll just open to the import manual files and you can browse out to the file you've downloaded. And then this question mark here lets you drill back to a little document on, just a couple sentences on what does it do, and then the information about what tables are in it. Okay, so all these different templates are out here for you to use. If it doesn't work for you, you can modify it, you can delete it. You do not hurt my feelings by deleting it. I don't even know that you did it, so don't worry about that. But make sure when you get it that you verify it's giving you the data you would expect. I've built them just to be generic and work with Fabricam. Everybody uses GP a little bit differently, so you may have to tweak them a little bit to work in your environment. Okay, I think that's done downloading. So now if I go into Excel Report Builder, we see that we have that PM distributions with GL detail. Looks about the same. Excel reports are just a little bit different in that Excel doesn't have a columns button to add fields on the fly. So you get what is marked for display and that's it. Now if I publish this, meaning go and create the Excel files, I can go to where all my GP ones are deployed. I'm just going to go to our desktop for now so it's easy to find for us here. And again, I'm logged in as admin, so I have permissions to all this. You would need to give permissions. And if I tell it to enable it, oh, product activated. And now we have that same type of data, a little bit different look. The columns are in a different order, just because it's two different imports. But you can see I'm getting that same type of data. It's in Excel. Now things are changing through the day. I can go to data, click refresh, and it's refreshing. If I change a bunch, I delete some, I click refresh, and it goes and gets whatever the latest data in my system is. So we can have that same list in SmartList, in Excel. This one's a little bit complicated for navigation lists. Navigation lists in general don't like some of the stuff that happens in general ledger with the account indexes and stuff. So that's why it's not out there to import from the web into Navigation List Builder, because it doesn't run there. Now, 98% of the lists you build will work in all three. It's just when we get some of these GL tables on there that navigation lists just don't have a fun time with them, so they won't always work. We're working on trying to find some workarounds for that, but it's kind of working around the way that Microsoft built the GL tables, or I guess it would be Great Plains back in the day that built the GL tables. So that is not there. But the other thing, as some of you I know are using SmartView, and if you're not familiar with that, that is eOne's version of SmartList. And we've just added a bunch of features that we thought were important to it and called it SmartView. So it has a little bit different look and feel, but very much self-explanatory as to the differences. That same list, anytime I build one in SmartList Builder and it shows up in SmartList, it will show up in SmartView. So we have that same list coming in. The big difference, now I need these totals, that type of thing. And this is just a lot quicker at returning data. So that's why we have that. Again, lots of little other features. If you're interested in that, let me know. I'll give you my contact information at the end and we can talk about that later. But just know that everything comes in there as well. Okay. So from here I can click modify as well. Some other features, SmartList have that go-to, that drill down back to GP. We can create that here in SmartList Builder as well. So let's say we want this to open the journal entry inquiry. We can always drill back to the payables information from there. So let's do that. And we have lots of options. We have built-in, which is all the ones that are built into SmartList. We've built those in so you can pull them into SmartList Builder. So if you need the open customer one, the open sub transaction, they're all built here. I'm going to show you how to do an open form though, which is for any other GP window that you might want. There also is open file if you're storing files in a folder or in a field. If you're storing a path to a file or something like that, we can open other smart lists. We can drill from a summary list to a detail list, that type of thing. The same as, under financials, you have account transactions, you have account summary. I could do the account summary and it drills down into the transactions for that summary record. We can do that type of thing. We can open websites. If you have tracking numbers, we can open the UPS, the FedEx, whatever it might be, site to get to that tracking information. We're going to do open form, and we'll just call this journal entry inquiry. And again, that's a GP window, so we'll pick that. It's in the financial series. And journal. Okay, if I do that, it will open the window, but I want it to actually take the data from the record I'm clicking on and put it into that window, so we need to add. And we have some options here. You can move the focus, put your cursor in a field. Run a field script just means whatever code is behind that field, it'll run. Basically what happens when you tab off of a field. Run a macro if you've recorded some macros. Set field value and run field script, put the data in the field and tab off of it. Set value of field just puts the data in the field, and then obviously wait for a few seconds. You can put a pause in there. Well, I want to put the data in the field and tab off of it to the next field, so we're going to do that for journal entry. And now what table does the journal entry come from? It's the year-to-date transaction open. And what field is it? It's called the journal entry field. That's what field I want to put into that field on that window. So I'm going to save it. save this, and I'm going to make it the default, the double click go to. So if I say OK and save, now let me, oh, I guess I did close them. Okay, I'm just looking for the document we were playing with before. Thought it was 970, maybe it wasn't. Oh, I think it's 497. Huh. So you can see this search is finding any record that's 497, no matter where it exists. So this is the journal entry I was looking at before. So I can do that. I can double click. It opens that journal entry window with that populated for me. Now this will work in SmartList as well, the same exact way. Opens this window. I can drill back to the payables information. So we can create that same flow you're familiar with in SmartList. We can create that on our SmartList Builder report too. So that is a go-to. Now, so that I don't have to search in SmartList or SmartView for record 497 for this, let's pretend that that's a filter that I always want on that list. This list should never return anything outside of 497. Let me show you. I can do it two ways. I could create search criteria here, and say where journal entry is equal to 497. And then what I have to do is save that as a favorite, right? I can call it 497, add a favorite. But that default list still would return everything. I want that default list to never return anything outside of 497. So in SmartList Builder, we can add a restriction. And I can do the same basic restriction. And here I actually have the ability to apply it to all users. I can apply it to a selected group of users if I want to. So when DynaSA and eOne SA log in, they only see 497. When SA logs in, they see all of them. So I could do that too if I wanted to. Very common when you're doing things based in like on salespeople or managers, the sales module, the payroll module, to limit the list. So instead of having to create a separate list for each user or each salesperson when they log in, you create one list, create a restriction for each salesperson, and apply it to their GP user. That way they log in, they only see the records for their salesperson ID. When their manager logs in, they would see all of them. You can do that type of thing. I'm just going to do all users so that we see it. And now when it runs, it's going to run in both SmartList and SmartView here in the background on us. You can see I'm on the default list. I can run that asterisk list, and I only get 497 because that's restricted now to that record for everyone. And they won't get anything outside of that unless they have access to SmartList Builder and can go and remove that restriction. Okay. We're getting close down to time here. I have some other things I can randomly talk about, but if you guys have questions, certainly start entering those into the questions queue, and I'll watch that and kind of intermingle those with just random things I have to show you. There is one question in there that came in earlier. Can you explain exactly what the difference is between GP tables and SQL tables? So the GP tables is the nice way of going to get any table, any data that exists inside of GP, whether that be core to GP, an add-on, or a third party. All of those are indeed SQL tables. So you could go to SQL tables and add one. The big difference is If I just create a dummy one here, when I go to add a SQL Server table, if I choose, let's see, this is our year-to-date transaction open. When I choose that, you can see it's not giving me nice names. You know, it's not journal entry, it's JRN entry. And if I add all these, it's not the nice way of getting them because now I have to rename all these fields. I have to do all the formatting on those fields. So if it is a GP table, use the GP table option. The reason we have the SQL table option is maybe you've created a custom view that pulls a bunch of stuff together, runs a report for you already. You're using it in SQL reporting services, and now you want it in Excel or you want it in SmartList. We can use those over and bring them in. Maybe you have some custom tables for some other application you're using. We can do that. Maybe you have CRM on the same database, same SQL server as your GP. At eOne, that's what we do. They're on the same SQL server, and I can pull now my CRM data into a SmartList, and then I can combine it with GP data. And we'll take a look at a couple of those examples on Thursday, how we're pulling in CRM and GP together and joining that data. So it doesn't have to be just GP data we pull into the builders and into SmartList and Excel and navigation list. It can be that outside data to pull it in. So don't use the SQL table option for the GP tables. Use the GP table option because you get the nice formatting and naming. Use the SQL option to go get some views, custom tables, other applications, tables and views, that type of thing that you might have on your SQL server. So great question. Okay, so keep those questions coming if you have them. Certainly enter them into the questions option there, or if you want to use chat, that's fine too. Other options we have in SmartList Builder is summary. And now this option is not available in Excel Report Builder or Navigation List Builder. It's just in SmartList Builder. The other things I've shown you so far are available in all of them, with the exception of go-tos. They're called drill downs in Excel. They're called actions in Navigation List Builder. It's just a naming convention Microsoft has, so we followed it. But the summary option allows you to create, let me get on a different list here, something we have. We'll go back to this one. We'll get rid of that list. The summary option gives us the option to create that summary list. So same as you have account transactions and account summary, we can create a summary of this one if we wanted to. Maybe I want to summarize this all up by vendor. So I can see all this information, but by vendor. I don't know, I'm just picking something. So I could come in here, find the vendor ID and group it by that. And now, without changing all the other fields, this is going to look a little funny, but it's basically going to count any string fields, meaning it's going to tell me how many records got rolled up. It's going to sum any integer fields. Some of them are going to look a little odd because account numbers, remember they're an index, which is technically an integer. So summing that doesn't make a lot of sense. But so some of these you have to come in and change a little bit. You change them to be a maximum, a minimum, something like that, because say, we're doing it by vendor ID. So vendor name, I would choose max or min because it's going to be the same for that vendor ID no matter what. Some of them just won't make sense to display in a summary list, so you would take those off your list. But let me just save it so you can see what it does. I might have too much for it going on. My restriction may have just thrown it so far that it just doesn't. Let's just pick one that isn't so in-depth and actually makes sense to, this doesn't make any sense either. Well, I don't really have one here that makes sense to summarize. So, but we can do that summary option, and it will roll it up. It'll group it. Now, that's a little bit of playing in there because it's going to do weird things to some of your fields. So some of them you have to kind of think, do I need to group by this too? How is this going to work? To some of that factor, maybe I just need to get rid of some fields, that type of thing. But you can create that summary and have a detail one. The other option in there is multi-company. If I turn that on, you get this list in multiple companies. Now, if I just run this, you're not going to know it. It doesn't like anything I'm doing today now. You're not going to know it's from multiple companies. There is no way to tell this came from multiple companies, but you can create a calculated field. And I probably should have talked about calculated fields, but calculated fields add a new column to your list. It's not a calculation at the bottom. It is a column that'll calculate. It can be strings. It can be adding two fields together. In this case, we're just going to have it show the company ID. So we do this a lot to look through the data, and if this scenario is true, give me this value. If this is true, give me this value. Otherwise give me a third value, that type of stuff. But you can do date comparisons. If you want to see the difference between two dates, a due date and today's date, that type of thing, we can do all that with calculated fields as well. So don't think of it as a calculation. Think of it as a new field that we want to take data from other fields in there and display a new value based on those fields. So almost any scenario you can come up with, we can create a calculated field to do. And now you can see, I pulled in the company ID, but you can see which company each record is coming from. And now this only pulled 1,000, so I probably didn't even get out of the first company, but it is pulling multiple companies' data into one list. Okay. Recording of the webinar, yes, you will get an email in a couple of hours about the recording. Is there a speed better using a SQL view versus many GP tables? So the question is, should I write it as a SQL view if I have that knowledge versus adding 8 tables to GP or to the GP tables? There really isn't a speed difference that I've noticed. In general, there might be something where you want to do kind of a different thing. Maybe you don't want a left outer or an equals join. You need something else, so you do that as a view. That's fine. It's really not much of a difference. So it's kind of where are you comfortable building them a little bit as well. But the speed differences, not really, not unless you're some guru at optimizing SQL views. But in generic writing of a SQL view, no, there really isn't much difference. Is it possible to permanently change the 1,000 records to 10,000? Yes. If you're talking SmartList, you have to be careful with this because remember, after about 2,000 transactions, 3,000 transactions, SmartList gets really slow. So if you change it to 10,000, you might make it really slow. But if you go to under System, there is a SmartList SmartList options, and you can pick whatever list you want to in here. So customers, whatever it might be. Now again, watch what you're doing, because if I do this and I have 1,000,000 records, it's going to try and return them all every time I run that list. So I don't recommend just changing them all to 10,000, anything like that. But changing one list or something like that is fine. If you're talking SmartView, it is under I think it's under favorite maintenance. Yeah. So then I choose, no, this isn't where it is. Nope. Sorry, I should know this. Here it is, SmartList maintenance. So under the SmartView menu, SmartList maintenance, then you have the list and you can change it. Same type of window. Change it here. Now changing it in SmartView isn't quite as dangerous because it can return 1,000,000 records a lot faster than SmartList can. But do you really want to return 1,000,000 records every time you run that list is kind of the question. So be careful changing those. And the other question here is calculated fields. I kind of went through that, how to create one, but there is so many different things in there that you can create. So it's, I put it down on paper. How do I want this to look? Kind of write it down, and then you can come in here. If you switch from fields to functions, these are all the different built-in functions you can use. They are SQL functions, so if there's something that's not in here, you just need to figure out the syntax for what it is that you want. So if you want to make them all positive values, you can do that. As I said, you can make them all uppercase. Some of these don't make any sense for anything in GP, but they're built in. There is on the eOne website, if you search for builder functions, you'll find a list of functions, and it's the same for Extender and SmartList Builder, so that's why that's listed that way. I don't know if I have PDF. Yep, I do. Okay. That walks through every function that's built in, what it does, what's the syntax, and gives you a couple examples. So that is here as well. But basically, you just need to come into calculated fields, add a new one, pick what type of data is that value going to be returned as. Is it a string? Is it a time? What is it? And then put your calculation in here. The big thing is when you add fields, it's got its own syntax. So I would recommend double clicking on the fields to add them, or you can click that add button up there, but there's no dragging. It's either double click or click the add button. And you can just type in here as well. If you know the formatting you want, you can type it. You know, I can just type plus signs and stuff like that. So, and we are over on time. So let me just do a couple slides and I'll stay for more questions. On our website, there are forums and blogs. So if you want to go to the forums, you can enter questions there. Our blog, we enter blogs every once in a while. You'll see when a new release comes out, anything like that, as well as we have some videos for SmartList Builder. So you find the SmartList Builder product and then there's videos there. And again, those URLs will be in the recording that you'll get. We do offer trainings. We have a self-paced training that you can purchase for your company. It's purchased at, it's $500 US. I'm not sure if that translates or if it's $500 for everyone. Basically, everyone in your company can get access to that then. We also offer private trainings if you're interested in that. Just contact our sales team. Thursday session I mentioned, we'll talk more in detail for more that advanced SmartList Builder user. A lot of different tips and tricks on how you do that. So come join me then. And there is my email if you have questions. Outside of this, I'll stay on and answer the questions that are in the question box, but you can email me additional questions if you need to after this as well. So thank you everyone for joining me. I know I ran over, so if you need to leave, I completely understand, but I will continue to answer questions. Is there a way to speed up SmartList based on history tables? We're trying to run SmartList for payroll deductions and benefits, and they take a significant amount of time. We have about 300 employees. Short answer, not using SmartList. You could, if you have access to SmartView, you could do that. That would be faster. The other option would be to use Excel Report Builder. So go get that same, whatever you're using in SmartList. If it's called payroll transactions, go get the payroll transaction Excel report. If it's one of the defaults, you can just get the default Excel report from Microsoft. They should be the same. Running it there will be a lot faster than in SmartList just because of the way it renders data. Now it won't be in GP if you need to route back on it, but it would be faster in Excel then, and you can use Excel functionality to filter it down and everything like that. So that is an option. Again, SmartView is an option. In SmartList, probably the only thing you could do is filter it down, maybe run it by department. You have to run multiple lists then, but it would make each one faster. But there really isn't a way to speed it up just in what it's going to do. I shouldn't say that. There is one setting in the DexInny. I don't ever recommend it, but oops, didn't mean to do that. Trying to get my mouse back. So there's this line you can put that's for exports. There's a different one for thought there was a different one for just running it, but I could be wrong. I know there is, but what it does is it doesn't do some of the formatting, so I don't like it because you can't guarantee the data isn't formatted different. Leading zeros taken off, things like that, so it can become incorrect data. Sandra, if you want to reach out to me via email afterwards, I can try and find that switch for you if you want to give it a try. The numeric field that returns as a string, so I can't work with it in Excel. Is it possible to change the field type for the SmartList to return an integer value, or is that parameter set somewhere else? You can certainly do that with a calculated field. So we want to change it from a string that GP is storing it as. A lot of times it's those user-defined fields are all strings. You want to create it as an integer. So in SmartList Builder, let me just show strings here instead so I can find one. So we'll just use user-defined one. So we can do a calculation. We want to return it as an integer. Okay, and now what we want to, oops, not special. I want functions. We want the system function a cast. So I want to cast I don't know what table it was in, user-defined one as int, I think is what it is. We'll validate it, yep. And so that would return it as user-defined one field as an integer back to SmartList. So when you export it, it's an integer. Now, sometimes exporting it, Excel says, that's not an integer, I'm gonna make it a string. We can't change that, that's Excel doing some funky formatting on us. But at least this in what SmartList is going to return to you will be an integer versus a string field. So it's giving us a chance to get it as an integer in Excel. The other thing you could do is build it here in Excel Report Builder, same way I just did it in SmartList Builder, and then that for sure would be an integer because that comes through with the formatting there. So great questions, guys. Thank you. I don't see any others, so and I will stay on the line for another minute or two if anybody has any questions, but feel free to reach out to me with other questions, and thank you everyone for joining me.